especially during an event like that, trying to create a box that every risk parameter is in for each site just really doesn't work. I think we're going to get to a point, hopefully in the next couple of years, where it's going to be much easier, where everybody can come to the table and say, yes, this is what, if we have X type of incident, this is what it means, this is what it's going to cost us. One of the big things from a CISO perspective is having an external party, whether it be FAIR or, quite frankly, the insurers, come in and say, we're not going to insure you unless you have X, Y, and Z, because this is the cost drivers to it. We live a life of risk. It doesn't matter if it's you, me, the person down the street. But from a security perspective, there's so much complexity that being able to understand what that complexity looks like, the levels of risk that come in and are associated to it, is what is going to make you a good CISO long term.
Ben, welcome to the CISO Confidential podcast, and thank you so much, first of all, for agreeing to do this with me. So Ben, you speak about something very interesting. You were in a healthcare provider at a point which was probably one of the most challenging times in the recent history in mankind, which was COVID.
Yeah.
And you were taking care of both physical and virtual security while you had to, spin up new places.
Yeah.
Why don't we jump on D-Day?
Yeah.
You found out that, not about COVID, but you have to do this. And what was your thought process?
Well, like everything else, I wasn't in the right space to be receiving a phone call on something like this. So I ended up, my wife and I were away for a family wedding, and we had just landed, we were in Florida, and we had just landed, spent the evening with family, and then at 12:30 a.m. I get the phone call that they're standing at the emergency response team.
12:30 a.m.?
12:30 a.m.
Night?
At night. So Friday night and Saturday morning. That they were standing at the incident response team because the first COVID patient in Connecticut had just showed up at one of our hospitals. But at about 6 a.m., I convened a secondary meeting with my team to say, hey, listen, if this does get bad and we need to start to move into, secondary locations, building field hospitals and whatnot, or even, I don't think we really started talking about testing sites yet, but it's just kind of in my mind of how do we grow scale if we need to. I actually had my head of network security engineering immediately call a couple of our network security vendors, and ordered 7 what I essentially call networks in a box, right? So that if we needed to scale, we could do that in a certain way, which ended up being very prescient later on because you couldn't buy anything after about a month and a half, right? So the decision point was actually they wanted everybody to stay where they were at so that they could get to us, right? So for the next 2 days, it actually ended up working out well. I was able to go to the wedding. So like the only hour and a half that I had for the next 3 months was that wedding. And then
you got the pictures,
right? and got out of there. And then, the next day we flew home, and it ended up working out well. So, that flight back was strange because, people were talking about it, but there wasn't really, no one was really asking or anything. It was just, this is weird, whatever. And then literally the next day, I think they started shutting everything down.
Oh,
yeah. Excuse me. So we, I get back and immediately, I dropped my wife off at home and drove straight to the office at that point. And we built multiple war rooms based on the work that was going on.
How many?
Probably had 6 different war rooms going.
Wow.
Everything from telephony to security to network, hardware, all that sort of fun stuff. So, how do we get everybody, healthcare, especially at that time, was very much you're in the office 7 days a week, right? Working from home was only if, you had a doctor's appointment or someone coming over to fix the house or something of that nature. So that's, getting all those folks together and driving towards a common goal like that is absolutely what cybersecurity is all about.
Fantastic. In this process of moving fast, you can only move fast when you understand risk.
Sure.
Because if you don't understand risk and you move fast, that can be a recipe for disaster, right? What are your views around risk management? Like why you were adding more sites? Mm-hmm. You said, I was making sure the firewalls are in place, but that's, I'm sure, one out of many controls that you had to have, right?
Yeah.
Now, what is the right degree of investments? To what controls? To what degree?
Yeah.
I'm sure you didn't have an infinite budget. You did have a budget because you had to increase the sites, but that's there. What are your views around risk management?
Yeah.
And especially how does that correlate to speed? of digitization?
Yeah, I mean, some of it, at the time we were very much doing popsicle sticks and bubble gum, right? Some of the sites that we built, we're literally roping Cat 5 around light poles in parking lots to get a hotspot close enough, or an access point close enough to where the nurses were going to be with their iPads. To be able to get a signal there, right? And we just kind of took it a step at a time. Especially during an event like that, trying to create a box that every risk parameter is in for each site just really doesn't work. And speed was a huge piece.
Yep.
And you're right, I didn't have an unlimited budget, but thankfully the leadership team of the system realized the situation we were in, and it was kind of, okay, we're not buying everybody Ferraris, but at the same time, we need to get this done. We need to treat patients, which is one of the great things about working in healthcare, is that it was always patient first. We have to get it done for them, and we don't know what this is going to turn into. So let's just make sure that we're doing this right the first time.
Fantastic. And fast forward to today, also, is your view on risk management? Do you look at it in an objective way, quantified way? How do you place that importance of communicating to your stakeholders, senior to you, in your team, your peers? How do you look at risk?
Yeah, so I think I've been lucky enough to have built a career around coming into organizations and either doing a greenfield build of a security program or a rebuild of a security program,
or adding sites.
Yeah, or adding sites, right? Exactly, in a very fast clip. The view on risk, at least to me, and how you communicate that shifts depending upon the maturity of the program, right? And how much you have to do is depending upon the maturity of the program. If you walk into an organization, and everybody knows that we got to do a whole lot of work here, it's much easier to, at a high level, talk about risk, and get everybody on board to say, okay, over the next few years, we're going to make X level of spend, and we're going to go after these major areas, right? Mm-hmm. Once you get relatively mature, or if your organization moves into a position where they start to, you're starting to look at revenue and how much are we going to spend. Then that's when you start to really need to get into that quantitative view of risk and really start to drive into, okay, this risk is going to cost us X amount of dollars if we end up running into it. Here's how I want to fix it. This is the cost, and you start to walk through that. I've always found that to be an interesting conversation with the CFO, mainly because everybody, each one of those numbers can be, placed at a different cost. And they always love to argue over it. But, I think, as we're, as a cyber industry, we're moving towards standards around risk and how we quantify it. I think we're going to get to a point, hopefully in the next couple of years, where it's going to be much easier, where everybody can come to the table and say, yes, this is what, if we have X type of incident, this is what it means. This is what it's going to cost us, and this is what it would cost us to reduce that risk to an acceptable level.
Ben, that's exactly the goal of the FAIR Institute, which is actually closely working with cyber insurance carriers.
Sure.
Because who better than insurance carriers to know what would be the cost drivers?
Absolutely.
Because they're the ones who pay out a lot of times.
Yep.
So what you just mentioned when it comes to cost, FAIR Institute has this thing called the FAIR MAM, Materiality Analytics Model.
Yep.
Which has worked with the cyber insurance companies to produce 250 cost drivers.
Sure.
A cost driver would be your lawyer cost, your PR agency cost, business interruption, etc., etc. It's 250 cost drivers.
Yep.
And for each kind of a risk scenario, different cost drivers are applicable. Because you don't have all 250 which are applied to in each scenario. So that actually comes out with an analysis with the min, max, and most likely number.
Okay.
It's never one number.
Right.
So from ransomware, if ransomware occurs to this part of our business, we're expecting anywhere between $40 to $60 million of impact. And that, because it's based on an open standard like FAIR, which is today used by 50% of Fortune 500 companies, makes it very defensible. And in order to take it one step further, cyber insurance companies actually give discounts based on this output, both on likelihood and loss magnitude.
Yeah.
So that's just the new way. Fair's been around for a while,
right?
But that's just, in a way, the next step,
right?
Where you talk about risk in a more quantified way, which is really understanding where the business is coming from and then communicating it back in terms of what they understand.
Yeah, and I think, one of the big things from a CISO perspective is having, an external party, whether it be fair or, quite frankly, the insurers, come in and say, we're not going to insure you unless you have X, Y, and Z, because this is the cost drivers to it. It's much harder for someone to argue with, hey, we're not going to get insured. We're not going to get insured for these sorts of events if we don't do X, Y, and Z.
Or the other way around. You are so good with your controls.
Yeah.
You're best in class in your industry, and therefore you deserve a discount in your premiums, in your deductibles, in your sublimits, etc., etc. So it's the carrot and the stick, which can go hand in hand. But that communication has to happen based on a standard format that is agreed upon with different stakeholders, where the question is not whether this is accurate or not. It's about what decisions you can drive using that view of quantification.
We live a life of risk. It doesn't matter if it's, you, me, the person down the street. But from a security perspective, there's so much complexity that being able to understand what that complexity looks like, the levels of risk that come in and are associated to it, is what is going to make you a good CISO long term.
Very, very useful advice. Thank you so much. This is very, very useful. And I know that our listeners truly enjoyed and are walking back with a ton of learnings.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for doing this with me. It's just been an honor.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. It was a great time.